There's a whole cluster of videos online right now, at least 8 or 9 that I found using nearly identical titles, all claiming that Grok, the AI chatbot built by Elon Musk's company, XAI, was asked who built the Great Pyramid of Giza, and that its answer shocked everyone, shocked archaeologists, or revealed some kind of undeniable hidden truth. Before we go any further, I want to be straightforward with you about what's actually behind these videos, because it matters for how you should weigh everything that follows. There is no verifiable, named scientist, no published study, and no actual documented Grok conversation behind any of these claims. What exists instead is a template, the same basic structure repeated across nearly a dozen near-identical uploads. Vague phrases like patterns that didn't fully align with any single explanation, no specific researcher named, no specific date, no way to check any of it against a real source. That's worth sitting with for a moment, because if an AI chatbot really had produced some kind of genuinely new, shocking revelation about who built the pyramids, that would be actual news, covered by Egyptology journals and mainstream outlets, not something confined to a recycled video format that keeps reappearing with slightly different wording every few weeks. But here's why I think this topic is still absolutely worth a real, honest, thorough look, and why the actual answer to who built the pyramids turns out to be far more interesting than anything a fabricated chatbot conversation could offer you. Because, unlike some of the other manufactured mysteries floating around online, this one touches on a question that used to be genuinely uncertain, that generations of serious archaeologists have spent real careers investigating, and that has, over the past several decades, been answered with a level of physical evidence most people have simply never heard about, because it doesn't generate as many clicks as a mystery does. So let's actually walk through what we know, how we know it, and why the honest version of this story doesn't need a single invented chatbot response to be worth your full attention. For a long time, the honest answer to who built the pyramids was frustratingly thin on physical evidence, which is exactly the gap that fringe theories, ancient aliens, a lost advanced civilization, enslaved masses working under the whip have rushed in to fill over the decades. The Great Pyramid of Giza was built roughly 4,500 years ago, during the reign of the pharaoh Khufu, sometime around 2560 BCE, making it one of the oldest large-scale structures still standing on Earth. And for centuries afterward, historians had to rely mostly on later second-hand accounts, most famously the Greek historian Herodotus, who visited Egypt roughly 2,000 years after the pyramid was built and reported, based on stories told to him by Egyptian priests at the time that the structure had been built using forced labor. Gangs of 100,000 men rotated every 3 months. That account, though colorful, was written 2 millennia after the fact, by someone who wasn't present for the construction and was relying on oral tradition rather than direct evidence, which is exactly the kind of shaky foundation that has allowed centuries of wilder theories to grow in the gaps. The actual turning point in our understanding didn't come from any dramatic single discovery, and certainly not from an AI chatbot, but from decades of patient, methodical archaeological excavation, much of it concentrated at a site just south of the pyramids themselves, an area archaeologists now call Hayt el Ghurab, more commonly referred to simply as the Workers' Village, or Pyramid City. Beginning in the 1990s and continuing for decades since, a team led by archaeologist Mark Lehner, working alongside Egyptian archaeologist Zahi Hawass and numerous other researchers, uncovered an enormous, sprawling settlement immediately adjacent to the pyramid complex, one that fundamentally changed how Egyptologists understand who actually built these monuments and how they lived while doing it. What they found there is genuinely remarkable, and it's worth walking through in detail, because this evidence directly and specifically answers the exact question these fabricated videos claim an AI chatbot mysteriously uncovered. The workers' village included large communal bakeries capable of producing bread on an industrial scale, breweries for producing beer, which functioned as a staple part of the workers' daily rations rather than a luxury, and extensive food processing and storage facilities. Archaeologists recovered enormous quantities of animal bone at the site, and detailed analysis of that bone revealed something genuinely striking. The workers building the pyramids were eating substantial amounts of meat, including cattle, sheep, and goat, in quantities that would have required organizing cattle drives and food supply chains stretching across a significant portion of Egypt to keep the workforce fed. Researchers have estimated that feeding this workforce required something on the order of 21 cattle and 23 sheep or goats being slaughtered every single day, a logistical operation on a genuinely impressive scale, and one that stands in sharp contrast to the popular image of starving, whip-driven slaves. The living quarters uncovered at the site tell a similarly revealing story. Archaeologists found what appear to be barracks-style galleries capable of housing groups of workers, alongside separate housing that appears to reflect a clear social hierarchy, including what seem to be more substantial residences for overseers and administrators, and even what may have been production facilities and smaller houses associated with skilled craft specialists. This is a settlement with genuine social structure and organization, not an undifferentiated mass of forced labor. Perhaps, most significantly, archaeologists have also discovered actual cemeteries associated with the pyramid builders located near the workers' village, containing the burials of the workers themselves. These aren't grand royal tombs, but they are proper burials, treated with a level of care and ritual significance that would be extremely difficult to reconcile with a workforce of anonymous, disposable slaves. Some of the burial sites even include small pyramid-shaped tomb markers of their own, a symbolic gesture suggesting these workers may have felt a genuine connection to or pride in the very monuments they were helping to construct, something that simply doesn't fit the narrative of miserable, coerced labor that persisted in popular imagination for so long. Skeletal analysis of the remains found in these cemeteries adds another important layer of evidence. Bioarchaeologists examining the bones have found signs consistent with hard physical labor, healed fractures, spinal stress, and wear patterns consistent with heavy lifting and repetitive strain, exactly what you'd expect from people doing genuinely demanding construction work. But researchers have also found evidence of medical care, including healed fractures that appear to have been properly set and treated, suggesting that injured workers received some level of medical attention rather than being discarded or left to fend for themselves, a detail that meaningfully complicates the old, simplistic image of a brutal, disposable workforce. There's also direct written evidence, discovered considerably more recently than the workers' village excavations, that adds yet another layer of confirmation to this picture, and it's worth spending real time on because it's one of the most remarkable archaeological finds related to the pyramids in the past several decades. In 2013, a team of archaeologists led by French Egyptologist Pierre Tallet discovered a set of papyrus documents at a site called Wadi al-Jarf, along Egypt's Red Sea coast, that turned out to be the oldest inscribed papyri ever found anywhere in the world. Among these documents was what's become known as the Diary of Merer, an official who oversaw a team of workers responsible for transporting limestone blocks, kept as a genuine day-by-day logbook recording his crew's activities during the final years of the Great Pyramid's construction. Merer's diary describes his team traveling to limestone quarries at Tura, on the opposite side of the Nile from Giza, loading the quarried stone onto boats and transporting it down a network of canals directly to the pyramid construction site, providing an extraordinarily detailed first-hand contemporary account of logistics, supply chains, and organized labor management written by someone who was actually there, working on the project himself, 4,500 years ago. This is about as close to a direct first-person confirmation as archaeology could ever hope to produce, and it lines up precisely with the physical evidence uncovered at the workers' village. Organized, skilled, paid labor teams, managed by officials, moving enormous quantities of material through carefully coordinated logistics, not an undifferentiated mass of anonymous slaves. Beyond the workers themselves, engineers and archaeologists have also made real, tangible progress in understanding exactly how the blocks were physically moved and positioned, another area that fringe theories have long exploited by claiming ancient Egyptians simply couldn't have accomplished this without some kind of outside help. A well-documented 2014 study published in the journal Physical Review Letters, conducted by physicist Daniel Bohn and colleagues at the University of Amsterdam, examined a wall painting found in the tomb of Jehudi-Hotep, depicting workers dragging a massive stone statue on a sledge, with one worker shown pouring water directly in front of the sledge's path. Bohn's team ran actual physical experiments, dragging weighted sledges across sand with varying levels of moisture, and found that wetting the sand in front of a sledge genuinely does reduce friction substantially, by as much as half, making it considerably easier for a team of workers to drag heavy loads across it, providing a real, physically tested, scientifically verified explanation for one of the specific techniques depicted in ancient Egyptian art itself, rather than requiring any outside intervention or lost technology to explain how heavy stones could be transported across the desert. Egyptologists have also identified and mapped the specific transportation network the builders used, another detail that keeps emerging from careful archaeological work rather than any single dramatic revelation. In 2013, and confirmed through further research since, archaeologists identified remains of an ancient harbor and canal system connecting the Nile River directly to the Giza Plateau, allowing quarried stone to be transported by boat for much of its journey rather than dragged entirely overland. A considerably more efficient logistics solution that matches precisely what Merer's papyrus diary describes. Additional research published in 2022 in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, led by a team of researchers using sediment core analysis, reconstructed the ancient course of a long-vanished branch of the Nile River, now dried up and buried, called the Khufu branch, showing that this waterway once ran considerably closer to the Giza Plateau than the Nile does today, providing the exact kind of navigable water access that would have made large-scale stone transport by boat genuinely practical during the period the pyramids were built, adding yet another independent line of physical, geological evidence supporting the same overall picture that the workers' village the skeletal remains, and Marier's diary all independently point toward. So when you put all of this together, decades of careful excavation at the workers' village, skeletal analysis showing signs of both hard labor and medical care, proper burials with genuine ritual significance, a first-person ancient logbook describing organized supply chains and labor management, physical experiments confirming ancient Egyptian construction techniques actually work, and geological reconstruction of the exact waterway used to transport the stone, you get an answer to who built the pyramids that's genuinely well supported by multiple, entirely independent lines of physical evidence, all pointing in the same direction. The pyramids were built by organized, skilled, and semi-skilled Egyptian laborers, likely including a rotating base of agricultural workers fulfilling labor obligations during the Nile's annual flood season when farming was impossible, working alongside permanent, specialized crews of stoneworkers, engineers, and administrators, fed through an impressively organized, state-run supply chain, housed in a purpose-built settlement with real social structure, given at least some level of medical care when injured, and buried afterward with genuine dignity and ritual significance. That's not a shocking secret an AI chatbot uncovered. That's the actual patient decades-long conclusion of real archaeological science, and it directly and thoroughly contradicts both the old slave labor myth and the various fringe theories claiming the pyramids required some kind of lost advanced technology or outside intervention to explain. It's worth being direct about why this specific topic, more than most, has proven such fertile ground for manufactured mystery content over the years, because understanding that pattern is useful well beyond this one video. The pyramids are genuinely, legitimately awe-inspiring. Precise, massive structures built with tools that seem, on the surface, almost too simple for the job, and for a very long stretch of the 20th century, the physical evidence needed to properly explain how they were built simply hadn't been excavated yet, leaving a real, honest gap in our knowledge that all sorts of speculative theories rushed in to fill. That gap has been closing steadily for the past 3 decades. But the older mystery narrative, ancient aliens, lost civilizations, secret advanced technology, had already taken firm hold in popular culture, reinforced across decades of documentaries, books, and now videos, well before most of this newer archaeological evidence had a chance to reach a mainstream audience. Combine that lingering cultural mystery with the fact that most people have simply never heard of Hayt el Ghurab, Merer's papyrus diary, or the Khufu branch of the Nile, and you get exactly the kind of knowledge gap that a video promising a shocking AI revelation can exploit, offering the appearance of new insight into a question that, quietly and unglamorously, real archaeologists have already answered rather thoroughly. There's also something worth saying directly about the asked Grok framing specifically, because it deserves the same honest treatment we'd give any AI chatbot claim. If you genuinely typed "who built the pyramids" into Grok or into any other capable AI chatbot right now, you would very likely receive a response touching on much of what we've just walked through. The workers' village, the skeletal evidence, Marier's diary, because these are well-documented, widely published facts, covered by National Geographic, the BBC, Smithsonian Magazine, and numerous academic Egyptology journals over the past 3 decades. An AI chatbot summarizing that existing, well-established body of knowledge accurately and coherently is a genuinely useful thing for it to do, but it isn't the same thing as the chatbot discovering something new, and it certainly isn't the same thing as the chatbot uncovering some hidden truth that archaeologists themselves don't already know, since every piece of evidence we've just covered was excavated, analyzed, and published by actual, named Egyptologists and scientists working in the field for decades before any modern AI chatbot existed to summarize their findings. So here's the honest, complete answer to the question this video title poses. Nobody asked Grok this question and received some unprecedented, shocking revelation that upended Egyptology, because the actual answer to who built the pyramids was already settled, not through any single dramatic discovery, but through patient, careful, decades-long archaeological work involving an entire excavated city of workers, a first-person ancient logbook describing the actual construction logistics, skeletal evidence showing both the hardship and the care given to the laborers, and physical, geological confirmation of exactly how the stone was transported. That's not a shocking secret. That's simply what happens when real science is given enough time, funding, and patient effort to actually answer a genuinely difficult historical question properly, and it turns out to be a far richer, far more human, and far more satisfying story than any fabricated chatbot mystery could ever offer you. Precisely because every single piece of it is real, checkable, and has a name and a publication attached to it. Exactly the kind of solid ground that separates real history from a recycled, unsourced video template designed simply to make you click. Let's spend some more time on the workers' village itself, because it deserves a fuller picture than a brief summary can give it, and because the sheer scale of organization uncovered there is genuinely one of the most underappreciated archaeological stories of the past several decades. Mark Lehner's excavations at Hayt El Ghurab, conducted over more than 2 decades in partnership with Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities and numerous international research institutions, revealed a settlement considerably larger and more sophisticated than anyone had previously expected to find near the pyramids. The site includes what researchers have nicknamed the galleries, long, narrow barrack-style structures arranged in blocks, each one estimated to have housed somewhere between 40 and 50 workers, suggesting a total resident population, at least during peak construction periods, that may have run into the thousands. A genuine small city built specifically to support the pyramid project, complete with its own internal infrastructure for feeding, housing, and managing that population over what would have been years, if not decades, of sustained construction work. The bakery complexes uncovered at the site are worth understanding in more detail because their scale directly speaks to the organizational sophistication involved. Archaeologists found large, standardized ceramic bread molds produced in enormous quantities, suggesting a genuinely industrial approach to food production rather than small-scale, ad hoc cooking. Some estimates derived from the bakery capacity and the bread mold quantities suggest these facilities could have produced enough bread to feed a workforce numbering well into the thousands on a daily basis, a level of centralized food production and distribution that required real administrative planning, supply chain coordination, and resource management, capabilities you wouldn't expect from a system built purely around coercion and neglect, and capabilities that instead point toward a well-organized state apparatus genuinely invested in keeping its workforce fed, housed, and functional over a sustained multi-year construction effort. It's also worth talking about the broader labor system Egyptologists believe was actually in place, because it's considerably more nuanced than either the old slave labor myth or a simple, purely voluntary labor force. The leading scholarly understanding, based on the combined weight of the evidence from the workers' village, Marer's diary, and other administrative records from the period, points toward a system involving a rotating labor levy, sometimes referred to by the ancient Egyptian term corvée labor, in which communities across Egypt were periodically required to send workers to serve on major state construction projects for a set period of time, often coinciding with the months when the Nile's annual flood made agricultural work impossible anyway, meaning the state was effectively redirecting an already temporarily available agricultural workforce toward monumental construction, rather than pulling farmers away from land they needed to be actively working. This rotating labor pool would have worked alongside a smaller permanent core of genuinely skilled specialists, stonemasons, engineers, and administrators who worked on the pyramid project as a long-term, presumably paid occupation, exactly the kind of layered, specialized workforce structure the housing arrangements at Hayt El Ghurab, with their distinct barracks and separate, more substantial residences for overseers, seem to reflect. There's a reason this more accurate, nuanced picture took so long to fully emerge, and it's worth understanding honestly, because it reflects real limitations in how archaeology works, rather than any kind of cover-up or suppressed truth. For most of the history of Egyptology as a formal discipline, going back to the 19th century, archaeological attention and funding was disproportionately focused on the pyramids and tombs themselves, the monuments, the artifacts, the hieroglyphic inscriptions describing pharaohs and religious beliefs, rather than on the comparatively unglamorous task of excavating worker settlements and searching for the physical remains of ordinary laborers. It wasn't until archaeological priorities began shifting more broadly toward social and economic history, understanding not just the rulers and elites of ancient societies, but the everyday lives of ordinary people who built and sustained them, that projects like Lehner's decades-long excavation of the workers' village received the sustained attention, funding, and scholarly interest needed to properly uncover and interpret this evidence. That shift in archaeological priorities, not some hidden, deliberately withheld secret, is the real reason this evidence wasn't broadly publicized and popularly understood until relatively recently. And it's a considerably less dramatic, but considerably more honest, explanation than anything a fabricated AI chatbot mystery video would have you believe. It's also worth directly addressing the specific fringe theories this kind of shocking answer video often gestures toward, without ever quite stating outright, because a fair, complete treatment of this topic should meet those claims honestly rather than simply dismissing them. Theories proposing that the pyramids were built with the help of extraterrestrial visitors or by a lost, technologically advanced earlier human civilization have never been supported by any physical archaeological evidence at all. No artifacts, no tools, no construction techniques, no written records from the period pointing toward any such involvement, despite well over a century of intensive professional archaeological excavation across the entire Giza Plateau and its surrounding region. These theories tend to rest primarily on an argument from incredulity, The idea that the scale, precision, or engineering sophistication of the pyramids seems too impressive to have been achieved by Bronze Age human labor and tools alone. But that argument has weakened considerably as archaeologists and engineers have progressively demonstrated through actual physical testing and experimental archaeology like the wet sand friction study, exactly how ancient Egyptian techniques and tools could genuinely accomplish the construction methods depicted in period artwork and described in period documents. The pyramid's precision, while genuinely impressive, is also not unexplainable given what we know about ancient Egyptian surveying techniques, including their sophisticated understanding of astronomy for establishing true north and their demonstrated mathematical knowledge, evidenced in surviving texts like the Rhind mathematical papyrus, which shows ancient Egyptian scribes working with genuinely sophisticated geometric and arithmetic concepts, entirely sufficient to plan and execute a project of this scale and precision using purely human ingenuity, organization, and sustained effort over time. There's a broader useful pattern worth naming here too, one that connects this fabricated pyramid video directly to the other. Recycled AI chatbot reveals a shocking secret content we've discussed in similar contexts. Every version of this template follows essentially the same structure. Take a real company's real, recognizable AI product, attach it to one of history's oldest and most culturally resonant open questions, promise a shocking or previously hidden answer, and then deliver either nothing verifiable at all or a summary of already well-established, publicly available information, dressed up as if it were a brand new discovery. The tell is always the same: no named researcher you can independently verify, no institution, no publication, no specific date tied to an actual event. Just a recycled title format reused across dozens of nearly identical videos, sometimes by the same channel, sometimes by entirely different ones, clearly copying a successful format from each other. Recognizing that pattern here, in the context of the pyramids, should make it considerably easier to spot the exact same structure the next time it gets applied to some other ancient mystery, some other piece of cutting-edge technology, or some other AI chatbot entirely, because the underlying formula rarely changes even as the specific subject matter does. So, if you take just one thing away from this whole discussion, let it be this: the real answer to who built the pyramids is already out there, published, peer-reviewed, and backed by physical evidence spanning an excavated city, a first-person construction diary, medically treated skeletons, and a dried-up branch of the Nile River reconstructed through sediment analysis. It didn't take a chatbot to find any of it. It certainly didn't shock anyone in the field, because archaeologists have been building this picture piece by careful piece for more than 30 years. What might genuinely shock you, if anything in this video does, is simply how much solid, fascinating, well-documented history has been sitting in plain sight this entire time, waiting for people to look past the recycled mystery videos and actually read about it. And that, in the end, is a far better ending than any of those videos actually offer. Not a cliffhanger, not an unnamed expert hinting at something bigger, but a settled, richly detailed, deeply human story. Farmers and skilled craftsmen fed on cattle and bread and beer, housed in barracks a short walk from the monument they were raising, some of them injured and healed, all of them eventually buried with pyramids of their own, however small, marking graves near the greatest one of all. That's who built the pyramids. Not aliens, not a lost civilization, not a secret and AI chatbot dug up for the first time. Just people, organized, skilled, and remembered, if you're willing to go looking for the real record instead of the recycled thumbnail.